Hello, welcome. I am so excited to speak with Laura again. We kind of had a little chit chat to get to know each other before we decided to dive in and have this episode recorded and everything. But we had such a lovely conversation. You were like just this, like I could tell that you were. I already knew when I knew what you were going to share about and saw your post in a podcast connection group, but you just like carry this light, and I knew that we would connect, and yeah, you delivered. To introduce Laura, I'm just going to read a small section from her website that I really love, that kind of speaks to what she'll talk about today and the work that she's doing, the beautiful, beautiful, heartfelt work that she's doing. So I will read a little bit for you about Laura. So she writes, I struggled to find out as much as I could about dementia. I spent hours Googling and attending lectures. I buried myself in news articles and watched a slew of webinars by healthcare experts, but it wasn't enough. The resources out there targeted caregivers living with the person with dementia. And several years later, this is still the case. These resources never covered how dementia affected me. They never spoke to how dementia changed my life as a long-distance daughter, or how to best address my fears for the future. Famous researchers, never resolved how I could stop feeling so helpless living far away from my parents. So I stopped depending on the experts to relate to me or tell me the magic answer. And I stopped just waiting for a cure. And instead, I stepped up. So Laura is doing this really incredible work, speaking to a kind of niche audience that just was not being seen and resourced and held, I guess. And dementia is, a heavy one, and affecting so many, affecting you.
Yes.
This came from firsthand experience. And you want to share on that just briefly, and we'll dive in?
Briefly. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Laura. Yeah. So basically, I was 28 when my dad was diagnosed with dementia. I was actually in the healthcare field, which is great, but I noticed that the experts couldn't tell me how to help from long distance. And so I created my own plan essentially for my parents. And that is what I teach long distance caregivers to do now. And I teach them how to step up in their own families because the rest of the healthcare industry is not empowering long distance caregivers. And I feel like that's like a very obvious support that we should be giving resources to. And yeah, as far as I know, I'm the only one in the dementia field that specializes in working with long distance caregivers. And just to be clear, what I mean by long distance caregiver, the way I define it, is caregivers that do not live with their person with dementia. So, in my case, I was supporting my dad who had dementia, and then my mom lived with him. But she was sort of doing the day-to-day survival activities, and I was able to really contribute in a more objective way, seeing the patterns, understanding what stage my dad was in, a lot of different things. So these are all things that very specific things that I feel like would empower long distance caregivers, and they're not being shared. So that's why I started my business. And yeah, just to try to help people like me essentially get through this time, because it is really heavy and grief filled. And I think the big challenge that we have in our society, and not just in this country, but in the world, is the stigma that comes with dementia. And I think a lot of that is because we don't have a cure yet. So it's many people's biggest fear. I think they've done surveys on it. So it's not, people really avoid talking about it. There's something called the law of disappearance, who people living with dementia have called, like, their friends basically follow the law of disappearance and just start, not talking to them anymore. And my dad actually experienced that too. So it's definitely something that's very real, and it's a lot of suffering that's happening. And I guess, thank you for saying that I'm carrying my light. I'm trying my best, but I see like a very, very big gap in this care. So
Yeah. I just want to mirror back a couple of things. Number one, I love that you named that long distance isn't necessarily long distance. Because when I think long distance, I think like state to state. But really, this could be you live 30 minutes down the road and you're just not in the household. So
exactly.
And for you, it sounds like your mom was dealing with, the trenches, the daily trenches. And you were like the visionary who could see the bigger picture and maybe think a little bit more, past like getting through this afternoon, to think
Yes.
about care options and just, what this really looks like in, next year, like how do we navigate this moving forward? And I also want to name, because we didn't name this, but Laura's business is Joy in Dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that, I was like, oh, like how sweet, like how just like different than what you would imagine coming across when you think about dealing with something as heavy as this topic.
Yes.
So could you just speak to like the name there? Because I love the name.
Absolutely. So originally I named it Befriended Heart because I had been like mentored by a social entrepreneurship professor from my grad school. And he was like, I think joy and dementia is just a little too strong. But now and so I was like, okay, I'll be Befriended Heart, right? But then like people didn't know what I do. But I did on social media have the names Joy and Dementia, and everyone just kept thinking that was my company name. So I was like, I think maybe for his generation, it might have been like a little too strong or, like whatever, like not appropriate, I guess. But I think for what we're going through now, like we need more joy than ever. And I actually wrote an article about this on caregiving.com where essentially talking about the tragedy narrative of dementia. And I'm not the first one to talk about this, but you see it a lot in media. Anytime anyone talks about dementia, right? It's like the thought is they're an empty shell of who they once were, this idea of the person's not there anymore. And that just wasn't my experience. Like I understand totally where people are coming from there, and I went through that as well because I think that's how we're conditioned as a society to be like, okay, there's no cure for this person. They're terminal. Essentially, in our capitalistic thinking, right? It's like they don't have a purpose, right? Because they're not working their job anymore. They're not making money, right? And so we kind of think like, which is terrible, but we're conditioned to think like, okay, they don't have value, essentially,
Yeah.
right? And we're seeing that with like,
Lost
something
cause,
right
like
now.
yeah.
Yes, yes. But that's just not the case. And actually it is very rough. It is very rough being on the dementia journey as a family member, especially because like I was very close to my dad emotionally. But what I found was our relationship transformed when I was able to start seeing the moments of joy that were there. And it really is all about our perception. So that's also what I work with my clients on is really shifting that perception because we are all conditioned to think that there is no joy in dementia, right? Everything that we're exposed to, that's what we hear. But I'm really trying to fight that narrative because it's not helpful, especially
Yeah.
for people that are personally experiencing the dementia journey. And also, like, as a business owner who is trying to get tailored resources to long distance caregivers in particular, and really try to get paid attention to by government officials so we can actually get, paid for caregiving. Like, I don't know, any of these amazing, maybe like some paid leave from our employer, like any one of these
Yeah.
things.
Some kind of help.
Yeah, that would actually be
Light
really
book, maybe.
helpful. Yeah, instead of like people being like, wow, you're really strong, right? Like, okay, that's very nice to hear, but like that doesn't help you in your day to day. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm so glad that you pointed out about how long distance caregivers, like, yes, they can be 30 minutes away, they can be states away. I've worked with a client where her parent was a country away, you know.
Wow.
But what I talk about and what's not in the research right now, and that's actually my dream and goal, which I'm moving forward to right now, but like creating a study of like who are the long distance caregivers, and let's stop trying to operationalize like the definition as they have in their research before of like, oh, well, long distance caregivers are only the ones that are, whatever, states away, right? But for me, and the clients I talk with, it's really an emotional disconnect. So you can feel that emotional disconnect basically as long as you're not living with the person that has dementia. And that's what I speak to because it really is a unique experience for long distance caregivers versus the primary caregivers that live in residence with the person with dementia. And not that those caregivers don't feel these feelings, but they're a different flavor, I guess, different type of suffering. So like for long distance caregivers, we feel a ton of guilt. We feel very helpless because we feel that we can't help in a substantial way. And again, that's because many, of the dementia organizations that are out there and also the healthcare system doesn't give us tailored resources, right?
Yeah.
And what I also like teach my clients too is that, and again, this is not talked about at all in media, but that I learned that there are actually advantages to living as a long distance caregiver. And we never hear that, right? But using those advantages to actually help your parents in a like really substantial way. So like I think one of the main advantages is because we aren't living with either of our parents or the person that has dementia, we're able to see patterns that, like, for example, my mom was not able to see because I think like the spouses are generally like forced to adapt because they're in survival mode, right? But like for us, as long distance caregivers, we're able to more objectively see like, okay, like what symptoms am I noticing of this dementia? Can I gauge like kind of what stage my parent is in? And then in that case, I can start to anticipate the needs in the future, and how to best like connect with my parent with dementia and also teach my mom in my case, right, how to connect with my dad. But also like thinking about the very long term implications, right? Like, do they have a will? Like who's the POA, right? Like my parents had to change their power of attorney on each of their wills, right, to me. I'm an only child, so it would be me. But like they hadn't done that in the past, right? And you just don't think about that stuff when my mom's surviving and trying to take care of my dad, right? And
Yeah.
finding the elder law attorney, for example, like finding the financial advisor, making sure that these professionals are vetted, and not trying to exploit families because that's also the case, right? So this is all examples of things that long distance caregivers can do and really contribute a great deal to the family.
Yeah.
And because we've like addressed those long-term implications and the planning, then we can be in the present moment with, my dad living with dementia, for example, or supporting my mom in her role. So I think like what I teach kind of satisfies that feeling of guilt, that feeling of disconnection, that feeling of helplessness, right? Because we are helping in a way that really like primary caregivers that live with a person with dementia really aren't able to do. And understandably, because they're like completely overwhelmed and in survival mode. And also, like, you really want to be able to make educated decisions on those, options because it really is like, your parents' legacy moving forward. And you want to avoid all of that crisis and stress that happens if that's not addressed, right? Because going through the dementia journey, it's like the last thing you want to have to deal with, trying to figure out all of that information, especially when your parent already has dementia and then they can't make the decisions that would be helpful for their care, right?
Yeah.
So I think all of that stuff is essential, and it just like blows my mind why um and makes me like scratch my head why the healthcare industry is just throwing all of this stuff at the primary caregiver. And I mean, primary caregivers, there's been studies like tend to be more depressed. They can sometimes be suicidal. It's because like they're completely overwhelmed, not only by the situation of seeing their loved one transform in such a way, you know, very grief filled way, but also just being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information and all of the things that they have to do. Right. And so I see a long distance caregiver being in a supportive role there. And obviously, I think it's really important too that, like, in my case, I needed to be very careful to not like step on my mom's toes, about like, oh, I think we should go with this elder law attorney. I think we should go with this financial advisor, for example. But there are ways that you can do it. Like basically what I did, and this is what I recommend my clients do, um, is come up with like 3 people that you think are, I guess, meet your vetting process and would be a good fit for your family. And then say, I'm really leaning towards this person, but mom, like, it's your decision, right?
To empower them.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, like, I'm empowering my clients who are long distance caregivers, but then also empowering the caregiving spouse, right? Because the main thing is you're trying to be in a supportive role and you're working together, right? I think a lot of times, and I think this is why long distance caregivers have a bad rap, because I hear about this from my clients as well. Like, siblings or other family members will be like, well, I think you should do this and I think you should do that. Like there's a lot of criticism, there's a lot of judgment. And then those people don't do anything that are doing the criticism and the judgment,
Yeah.
right? But what I argue is like, not every long distance caregiver is like that. And maybe the issue is, And some people, granted, like some people don't want to help, but there are some long distance caregivers that do want to help that don't know how. And that's the gap that I'm trying to fill.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so, I mean, it's a heavy one. And it seemed, as you were speaking, I just kept thinking, like, it really sounds like the niche for you is to assist those long distance caregivers who want to be of help, who want to help, but maybe don't know how to help. And then, at the end of the day, a lot of that is being a resource to the
Yes.
person making the ultimate decisions, so that it's like, they can be the researcher, they can, do the legwork, the things you can do sitting on your computer from, across the country or whatever it is. A lot of that is so time consuming, can be, I'm sure it's, cut in like half when you have somebody holding your hand and walking you through and being like, these are the things we need to research, because it's like, if you don't know, you don't know, especially if you're just
Yes.
like thrown into the fire pit
Yes.
in the middle of it. Yeah, that is, I mean, what a gift to like have, like, oh, let me take your hand, let me walk you through like all the
That's
things that you.
exactly it. Yes. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I look at it as. It's like, I mean, I don't know, it's much more deep, like, it's much more deep than this example, but it kind of is just what comes up in my head, right? It's like you're in this entirely new world, right? And like you can look up the information, but it's all very overwhelming. It doesn't really, you have to like sift through, like, okay, what type of dementia is it? But there's no long distance caregiving resources. Like it's just too much. And that was the case 10 years ago. It's still the case. I talk to my clients, they're like, yeah, it's still hard to find things, but like you're thrown into this new world. You don't know where the heck you're going, right? And so I'm kind of like the tour guide essentially, in a practical way, but then also, there's because it's so heavy, there's inevitably so many emotions that come up in this journey. It's not just about like, okay, checking the boxes. Like we got the financial advisor, we got the elder law attorney, we got the home care company that will support my parent. It's also about supporting my clients emotionally with, the anticipatory grief and like the even some trying to find moments of joy, right? And recognizing those as moments of joy. And also, again, like the guilt, the helplessness, the anger, the resentment, right? Because inevitably, um, there's like dynamics that come up, between family members, especially when we're all running by fear. And so that's what I worked on for myself is like, okay, how can I stay present in this moment and not be dragged back into the past where, you know, my dad was totally different. And, I had, sort of a tension filled relationship with my mom and she's doing this again, right? Like that's where you do not want to go, right? But we default to that because we're all afraid essentially. And we're all like still ourselves, but not ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
And then we're also afraid of the future. So really like the only place that we can be when you're on the dementia journey is present in the moment. And so teaching people how to like not get carried away going in the past or running to the future, but really staying in the moment. And you can, I've learned you can plan ahead while still staying in the moment with your parents, trying to even create a stronger connection. I've always been very close with my dad, but I think in some ways during his dementia journey, he had like even more of a, like an emotionally intimate relationship because of the fact that I just was meeting him where he was. I understood him.
A lot of intentionality, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So,
Well, and it's not, and I just want to say, like, that's not just my experience. Like, my clients that I've worked with have also had really valuable moments like that, that they just like didn't notice because our perception is always like scared and angry and sad, essentially. Right.
yeah. Oh,
So,
gosh, Laura. I mean, so, okay. So we talked a lot about that practical side, I guess. Practical, like planning ahead. What does that look like as far as emotional support? Like, what kind of tools do you use to support them, or like, teach, or what do you implement there?
yeah, so I think this is a good time I just created a mission statement. So I'm a business, but I'm a for purpose business, for good business, I guess. And so
Yeah.
I'm kind of bringing in some of my nonprofit education and like, well, I'm a business, but I can still have a mission statement. So I just wrote this mission statement. So excuse me while I read it. So I help long distance caregivers navigate their parents' dementia one positive and practical step at a time, so they can discover that joy is still possible, take care of their parents, and stop putting their own dreams on hold. Uh,
I love that. I love that you stop putting their own, because I could imagine it can be so all consuming.
yes.
So there's some, like, take care of yourself angle that has to be part of the equation, or you're I mean, then like, talk about resentment, talk about like all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that being said, with the emotional support, I have like a few different resources and, I ask the client if they're interested in doing that, but I definitely teach some mindfulness principles. If people are open to meditation, I offer that. I think meditation helped me a lot, and my mindfulness practice in my dementia journey helped me stay present, but also really grounding myself before I met with my parents, or I even talked with them on the phone, and having like held myself and all my feelings beforehand. So that way I could go in without that baggage, and talk to my parents. And I actually do this before I speak with any of my clients as well. I make sure that I'm grounded because I really want to be 100% there for them. I think sometimes, if like I've had the lived experience before, there's sort of this thought of like, "Oh, that relates to my experience," or "That's bringing up some anger for me," right? But, like, that's not my client's responsibility to hold, right? I'm holding their stuff, so I make sure to ground myself before that. But yeah, teaching them mindfulness practices if they haven't already learned about those and how to apply them to connecting with themselves, with their caregiving parent, and the parent that is living with dementia, and also the family members that can criticize and judge, right? So I would say that I call it strengths assessment, but it's essentially human design. I do an analysis of my clients' gates and channels. I really believe that these are unique strengths and gifts that we're here to share. And what I've found is, it can be overwhelming realizing that we're long distance caregivers and all of the things that we need to do, especially because we don't know what we don't know, right? And we've been through like, it's almost like, we've learned how to advance in a career, right? But like, this is something that's completely different, you know? And so I basically heard from clients, and I've seen this for myself too, is like, the things that the gifts that we're here to share and our unique strengths that are in our gates and channels are much easier for us to access than, for example, like, hey, go research a financial advisor. You know what I mean? So I actually use that in the beginning to really empower my clients, and most especially teach them how their how their energy runs and what their authority is. And so like I had this.
Powerful. The authority is a
Yes.
changer. Yeah.
So much of a change. And we're talking about sort of like how we're conditioned by society to think about dementia, how like we as women are conditioned not to listen to our gut slash our emotion, our authority. I have an emotional authority. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Like, if I make the decision in the moment, I'm like, even whether I'm happy or whether I say yes or no, I'm like, oh God, why did I make the decision that fast? And I think about that like that night, and then the next day I'm much more even keeled. So like following that has helped me a lot. So at the time with my dad's dementia journey, I did not know what my human design was, but I think that would have been very helpful. And with like one particular client I can think of, she was a generator, and so she had sacral energy, and she was like, yeah, like I just feel like I know the answer immediately, and like my husband questions me, and she's like, okay, well I guess we'll do what you want to do. And then she said, and then I end up getting mad at myself, because I didn't listen to myself. And I was like, yep, that's a very common thing with generators who are sacral energy. And so what's really beautiful is like her dream was to her mom was, at the time, was like in a she was living by herself, and my client was in a different country trying to be the primary caregiver, and she really just wanted her mom to live with her and not be in like a memory care. And so her mom, as I worked with this client, her mom went to two different memory cares, I think, and then my client found this like amazing huge house
in her neighborhood, in like my client's neighborhood, and was just like, oh my gosh, like I really want this house. I can see my mom living with my family, but like I don't even know if I want to like bid on it, you know. And so she listened to her sacral because she had worked with me, and they bidded and they got like this amazing price on it, and she bought her dream house, and her mom is now living with her.
Wow.
So
She
yeah,
feels
I
good
mean,
about having her moment. Like, I feel like that has got to just be a whole nother level of heaviness.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so like that's the beauty that can come from just like empowering ourselves. It's something that like we already know how to do. We've just lost touch with it, right?
Yeah.
I think we all have this inner wisdom, but we just need to be reminded. And so, you know, part of my trying to carry the light is really trying to, you know, teach women what they think they already know, but it really validates, you know, what their strengths are. And some of them are surprising, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Just for like clarity's sake here, in case anyone tuning into this one is not familiar with human design, what Laura is talking about is a sacral authority, which certain profiles in human design carry what's called a sacral authority. I have this, so I know it very, very well. And it is quite literally an inner compass so perfectly in the center of your being that will quite literally pull you forward or be like, oh no, very, very in the moment. And I mean, I can speak for myself and for most people that I've connected with once they have understanding of this is that it's very reliable.
Mm-hmm.
If you have this, like you can own it and you can feel so sure in the decisions that you make. And you will also feel so sure that you messed up if you don't follow it because it will come back to bite you. That's been my experience 100%. And you have an emotional authority, right? So you have
I
that
do.
to ride. I've talked about this in another episode with a projector with emotional authority. And yeah. And sometimes that clarity will come, just in a short amount of time. And other times it's like
Mm-hmm.
you need a whole like moon cycle. Like it just really
Mm-hmm.
depends. You can like feel what that energy feels like. And it's this sure, like confident place, not this like, oh, I feel like I just need to make a decision or, none of that shakiness. When it's right, it's right.
Yes. And I think like urgency is the most uncomfortable thing to me. You
Yeah.
know, like I was like I've written like a couple articles for Parade magazine, and like their timeline was like so stressful, you know, because I'm trying to be mindful in what I put in there because I know people are going to be reading it, and um I want to create positive thoughts for people about the dementia journey because there is positivity in addition to all of the grief and the anger and all of that stuff, right? But I can't be like forced to do that in a short amount of time, you know? So, and that's what I've learned about myself. So now I do sleep on it. And then I'm like, okay, I feel more assured about this decision. But I think what's really also really helpful is even for my clients who have sacral energy, we're sort of all like, especially as women, we're taught to like second guess ourselves or to be like, well, how are you sure right in the moment? You know what I mean? Because you didn't do your research and all this stuff, right? Because we're very like intellectualized in our society, patriarchal, capitalistic, all of those reasons, right? So we're very like mind focused essentially and not body focused. And so that's what I love about human design because it's like, no, like we have the answers in ourselves. We just have to figure out like what type of essential like decision makers we are.
Yeah. Where is the like tune in place? Like how do you tune
Yeah.
into the way that your body wants to express that wisdom and really like download it so that you can feel it and express it and run with it? I have a question about speaking to this like assessment that you do to figure out their strengths. So I'm guessing you've had experience with certain gates and channels that speak very directly to what you see as strengths for these caregivers. And
Mm,
and I think you mentioned like you kind of start with those places. So like if that research or whatever is totally not them and it just isn't like it's going to be a lot of friction, you lean into some other kind of maybe quicker wins that they can like
mhm.
start feeling more positive about the outlook. Like, okay, yes, I can make an impact. I can be helpful. I can, do this thing. Do you want to speak to a little bit of that maybe from your own experience? And I know you probably know your own chart really well. So
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, fairly well. It's let's see. So I kind of interpret it myself a little bit too. I think because like I'm sure you found Bonnie, it's like you're reading online what these gates mean and stuff, and you're like, I don't know that, but I guess it's interesting. Like, I feel like this might be one of my gifts because I'm able to interpret it in a way that pretty much always resonates with my clients. And I've done it like with my parents and my husband, and my husband is like super scientific, doesn't believe in any of this stuff, and he was like, wow, that's pretty surprisingly accurate. So in my experience, I found, like, when I read through all the gates and the channels, and I also kind of sum up like the theme that I'm seeing as well first, but there's only been like a couple of gates that people haven't really resonated with. And you and I know too, it's like human design is an experiment essentially. So it's kind of like trying that on, and if it doesn't resonate, then you can leave it.
Yeah.
But I know for me, like, there was a couple, I'm trying to think, I think like pretty much everything resonated with me, but a couple of them were very eye-opening in the way of like, I see how this is playing out in my life. Like for me, I think I shared with you, like when we were talking in our last conversation, it's like I'm essentially supposed to be a spiritual leader. I'm a spiritual leader in some sense, and that's actually why I've been starting to incorporate. I was already doing like mindfulness, but I'm incorporating human design into it more now too, because that to me, I used to like do Myers-Briggs and stuff, but like there's no like spiritual aspect per se to Myers-Briggs, and there's a lot less boxes that like people fit into in Myers-Briggs
Yeah.
than like human design. It's like a billion different combinations. So yeah, so it's like I'm a spiritual leader. I'm actually like, I help people. Essentially, it basically said this: I help people find joy in difficult emotional things, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing that, right? And
Yeah.
what's really cool is to see my clients, like one of them, I can't remember what the gate was, but it's essentially like, you're really creative, you can think outside the box, right? Like sometimes you can be a web designer, and like that was what one of my clients was. She was totally a web designer, and I was like, you're accomplishing that, that's why you feel so satisfied in this job. But as far as like relating to the person that their parent that has dementia, some people are like more like physical touch, some people are more emotional. If you're a good communicator, like really working on that. I can't think of anything else very specific, but it's such a powerful, intimate conversation that I have with my clients that like, I think maybe that's why like I don't remember exact examples, because
Yeah.
they're just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this is what I need to like keep going in this world, and to know that it comes to me easily. I'm not just, a lot of people are like, I thought I was crazy because I felt this way, or I thought this, and now I don't feel that way, so it's very empowering.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that in the readings that I've done for others. And it's like so often some little part of a chart, and whether that's human design or the astrology, I really do a lot more with the astrology, I think, but that's just my jam. But
Yeah.
it's this little key that unlocks something, and they're like, oh, like light bulb moment, and it's like
Yes.
it just opens up something for them. And yeah, what you're speaking to sounds like you're like shining a light on something in them that they maybe didn't recognize or own as being this like true gift that they carry. It's just, empowering. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, Bonnie, because that reminds me, like, I wrote down, like, if there's a particular gate, I think it's usually with the gates, but I'm like, so I wrote this down, but it doesn't make sense to me. Does this make sense to you? And they're like, yes, this is so helpful. And I'm like, okay, good. So I think in that way, like, I feel like I'm also a messenger in some way too. And so somehow I'm able to translate this stuff, so like it helps people make sense of it. Cause I've had like, I think one of my friends, because when I first started getting into human design, they're like, oh, I want to look up my gates and channels too, right? And then they would like Google it and be like, I don't know what this means,
It's a new world.
Yes. And so I think just like having the ability to do that, and then there's, since we're on the whole like spiritual talk right now, I've also recently like started having this ability to like intuitively know something about a client's future if I'm supposed to be getting this message, and I'll say, hey, I'm getting a message to share with you, would you like to hear it? Right. So like I haven't put this in my business website or anything yet. It's kind of like something that's come up
Just happens
recently, but it's very powerful. It's been powerful in my life too. So I'm like, okay, if I'm supposed to share this message, like I'll ask them if they want to hear it, you know. But honestly, I think we need all of the joy, all of the empowerment, knowing that we have this wisdom, and also like just getting the messages from the other side that are going to help us, like, you know, make mindful, compassionate decisions, because our world is like on fire right now, and our country was even worse. So, you know, all the amount of wisdom that we can, you know, receive is helpful, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were sharing, even before you named these like messages you get, I'm like, oh, like she's channeling. Like she's
Oh,
just
awesome. Okay, I've never thought of it
in
that
my
way.
head. I'm like, just yeah. And you remind me. I want to like open this really quick because I hope it. Oh no, it's not going to show it. Oh yeah. One of my clients, in her email signature, she has this one little quote that just like came to mind as you were sharing this, and it's, "If you have knowledge, let others light their candles at it." And it's like,
Yes.
it's just, that's exactly what you're doing. That's exactly
Yes.
what you're doing.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I really love this, Laura. Is there anything like really exciting on the horizon for you that you want to share before we like start to wrap up, or anything else that
Um,
you feel like just burning desire?
yes, actually. So something just came up. In the future, I'm gonna be working with a researcher slash principal investigator at a university here in the US in figuring out like, what do long distance caregivers look like now? Are
Oh
they
wow.
still daughters? Are they still, you know, in their 30s and 40s? Or are there more men now? Are there more people in the LGBTQ plus community? How can we get tailored resources to them? Because that's really how you change policy in this country, is
Yeah.
essentially to like, you need to do the research, you need to prove it, essentially, that like, you know, long distance caregivers need tailored resources. So I'm really excited to like be doing that in the future, with her. And then I'm also contributing a story to one of my friend's books about sandwich caregiving. And what's really fascinating is, while I didn't have you know, a child while I was going through the dementia journey, I was going through the fertility process for more than 5 years. And so I'm basically going to write about how I argue that it can be similar to having a child in the amount of work that you put in. And yeah, there's a bunch of parallels that I've seen between the fertility journey and the dementia journey. So I'll be sharing that in the book.
Really cool. Did you
Yeah.
see the sandwich?
Yes. Yeah. They're called, so in the industry, they're called sandwich caregivers, which is like, again, a very uncomfortable, like scary term, but like where you're taking care of your kids and you're taking care of your parents at
Oh
the same time,
wow. I see.
especially with dementia, adds more complications. So yeah, those are the exciting things coming up on the
Yeah,
horizon.
very cool.
And yeah, and I would still love to meet with any long distance caregivers that, you know, need to navigate their parents' dementia, and, you know, not wanting your own dreams to go away because you're taking care of your parents. So
Yeah. I love that. This is, I mean, such a beautiful calling, and I feel like you're the right person for the job, Laura. You were like just this ball of light and big, beautiful smile. Like, how could you not like enjoy some time with Laura? That's just my
thank
like,
you, thank you. Yeah.
yeah. And it sounds like you have so much wisdom to share from so many different angles and like ways to meet people where they are in that journey, and from lived experience, no less. So it's
Yes.
just,
Thank you.
you know the trenches, you know, yeah, and you know the way out, hopefully. So it's just,
Yeah, and that's the main reason why I started my business. I was like, someone needs to do this that has come from lived experience, because there are things that we know that professionals, no matter how many books you read, cannot
the same.
truly empathize with you. And so so if anyone is wanting to chat, you're a long distance caregiver, I offer a free 20-minute consult so we can talk about your situation and see if we'd be a good fit to work together.
Yeah. And before you go, I have a quick question, because I know, okay, I feel like we should have had this in the beginning, but I'm very curious about those like beginning signs that people should be looking for. And then I think you also had some kind of free offering, like a guide of some sort that I saw on your website. So I would love for you to like just speak briefly to that maybe.
Absolutely. So those signs are actually in my guide because my
Okay.
guide is all about the dementia stages.
Okay, then don't speak to them then. Let people know. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I'm not like worried quite yet about my parents, but I'm like, I need to be paying attention at the very least. I mean, I personally don't know those maybe signs that you might not really think are like anything too crazy. So I feel like I
Yes.
need the guide just to like be aware.
Yes, exactly. And the way that the perspective that I write the guide from, because you can find the dementia stages anywhere, the perspective that I write the guide from is from a long distance caregiving perspective. So how, what my mom would notice about my dad, I may not notice that necessarily, but I would notice something else, right? So really like taking that tailored perspective is important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting because I mean, I can't even imagine what that exactly looks like, but yeah. And every time you say long distance, I'm like, but it's not long distance. It's not really like that's what my mind is just going there. I'm like, no, like my mom lives 20 minutes away, like, but I'm not, in the day to day with her. So
Yeah. And the reason why I say long distance is because like that's just what connects with caregivers.
yeah,
That's what's said in the industry and stuff, but I'm trying to kind of like break that
yeah.
down.
But like as a consumer, let's say if I'm like my mom is, presenting signs of dementia and I'm looking for support, I wouldn't know to type long distance. That's a whole like keyword search engine optimization kind of thing.
Yes, no,
But
I agree.
yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Laura. This was awesome. And I can't wait to get this one posted. And I will definitely have all of your links, your website, contact, all of that. And I think I'm going to open with that guide so that people are like aware that they can tune into that and see like, does this make sense for me to like be really paying attention to right now? So that's awesome. Thank you
That
so
would be
much.
great. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for having me. And thank you all for listening.
Oh, let me, for anyone listening, I keep forgetting to do this, but if you are here and you enjoyed this episode, I would love a rating or review on whatever platform you have stumbled upon this on. And that's it. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day wherever you're headed next. Thank you.